Today on the Playbook Podcast, Oregon sues to block President Donald Trump from deploying the National Guard to Portland. With less than 48 hours left until a government shutdown, top congressional leaders prepare to meet with the president. Can they agree on an off-ramp? And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits the White House amid a new push for a ceasefire. Hello, I'm Adam Wren.
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Monday, September 29th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. Dasha, there's a lot of news, so let's get right to
Let's
what's
do it.
driving the day. Over the weekend, President Donald Trump announced that he was ordering the Defense Department to send troops to Portland to use, quote, full force, unquote, to combat protests that he said were interfering with immigration enforcement. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth then ordered 200 members of the Oregon National Guard to be called into federal service for the next 60 days. And last night, Oregon and its largest city, Portland, sued to block that from happening, calling it an unconstitutional abuse of power. Dasha, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm curious, what are you hearing from the White House? Should we just expect on a rolling basis every month or two to see the White House look to a new progressive city to send the Guard to?
I mean, either progressive or just city, period. Certainly, progressive cities are a major target, but he's also thrown in places like Memphis. I do know from White House sources I talked to that they've got a list of places that they are looking at. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty valid expectation. I do think Portland is a particularly important symbol for the Trump administration because this is a city that kind of has the catch-all of everything that they are trying to target right now. It's a city that's very friendly to immigrants, that's extremely liberal, that is also the hotbed for the more far left element of the Democratic Party, if you can even call it that. So this just
Yeah, and Dasha, I talked to the Oregon Attorney General who filed suit against this measure on Sunday, and Dan Rayfield, a Democrat there, and I asked him, how do you think you're going to have any more success with this lawsuit than California did with Governor Newsom's suit that didn't really go anywhere? And he didn't really have an answer for me. So I wonder, Dasha, do you think that like Donald Trump has become so accustomed and so skilled at using all the different levers of power in the White House that he's really sort of cornered sort of a way to flood the zone on almost every one of his policies?
I think they've figured out a method that they feel is working very well, which is either like move faster than anyone can keep up with, or find the advantages that you have, whether it's the right judges placed in the right positions from his first administration, or the sort of new loopholes and boundary pushing approaches to the law that they have figured out. They want to test it this time around. And again, the point about Portland here, or our colleagues Maya Ward and Natalie Fertig had a great story about how the administration, Trump in particular, has had his sights set on Portland for a long time. It sort of, to them, represents one of the most egregious examples of the summer of 2020, of examples of left-wing riots and how they felt cities got out of control, and Trump felt he didn't go far enough in trying to suppress some of that back in his first administration. This time it's a no-holds-barred approach, and you're seeing this at the same time as Hegseth has announced this like gathering of military leaders that Trump is going to attend. It is posturing, it is PR, but it is also real action that has an impact on these cities and the people that live there.
Well, Dasha, there's a lot more happening across Washington today. And the first of those is that the countdown to a government shutdown is on. At the end of the day, tomorrow, when the calendar turns to October 1st, government funding will lapse and a federal shutdown will begin, unless, of course, a stopgap spending measure is agreed upon. So what's the next step here?
Look, I think that the White House posture isn't going to change all that much, at least publicly, right? I'm curious about the difference that we may get from our reporting about what happens on the public stage versus behind closed doors, because publicly the administration is still very bullish that they feel like it is going to be Democrats that suffer the most. I had a report late last week that they are planning to quote inflict maximum pain on Democrats during the shutdown. We saw the reporting from our colleague Sophia Kai about the plans that Russ Vogt has to cut a bunch of federal workers during a shutdown. I mean, the White House is expecting, and I think it's an appropriate expectation given how we've seen um, this Congress function on partisan lines that. There is a shutdown coming down the pike here, and they just feel that it's going to be less painful for Republicans than for Democrats. Now, behind closed doors, as they actually start to have these conversations and the rubber starts to meet the road, does that posture change? Maybe, but right now, it's still pretty bullish.
Yeah, Dasha. And what's interesting to me is that again, the through line here, and so many of the things that we're talking about is that Trump has figured out how to work the levers of power to his advantage. It was Rahm Emanuel, the former White House chief of staff, who said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And again, this shutdown could be another instance where Trump. People like OMB director Russ Vought could use the shutdown to sort of advance their agenda in terms of winnowing down the federal workforce. And it seems like this shutdown is going to happen. It seems like there's not a lot that could dissuade us here.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is putting their bets on everything being hunky dory by the end of this week.
And this isn't the only major meeting at the White House that we're tracking today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is due to meet with Trump, and the big topic of conversation will be the administration's proposed 21-point peace plan, which the president discussed with Muslim and Arab leaders on the sidelines of the United Nations summit last week. Dasha, what's the broad outline of the proposal, and what are you hearing in terms of optimism from White House officials that this can get done?
It's a 21-point plan. There are real details on paper here, and one of the surprising things that President Trump said is that he doesn't want to see Israel annex the West Bank. He's very rarely drawn lines for Netanyahu throughout this conflict. He is starting to draw some serious lines, and this is certainly influenced by the strike on Qatar that had set off massive alarm bells throughout the White House. Everyone in the West Wing that I talked to was surprised and really frustrated with Netanyahu, to put it mildly. One advisor said to me, this was a real screw up. Said it in terser terms from Netanyahu. This source said, if you're going to do something like that, you better make sure it succeeds, and they don't feel that it was successful. So this is a major moment, I think, in this conflict. This is the most this is the farthest apart. This is the most daylight that we've seen between Trump and Netanyahu, and they're going to be meeting face to face.
Dasha, so much of the way that President Trump views foreign relations is through personal relations. We saw kind of warm relations with Netanyahu throughout the first Trump administration, but over the last 9 months, do you think there's been a fraying of that relationship, that one-on-one relationship?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly in the last couple of months, between Israel moving faster on Iran than the U.S. Had initially wanted, and the strike on Qatar was really crossing the line for the administration, and President Trump in particular is now very frustrated with Netanyahu. That warmth has definitely cooled, and at this point he's going to look to close this thing out, and you can't forget the context of his relationship with Putin here as well. Again, these are two leaders that have become real thorns in his side.
And we often like to end the show with something from the Playbook newsletter. Dasha, I don't know if you've been tracking this over the weekend, but we obtained a pretty buzzy fundraising invitation for a Napa retreat from major Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee donors on October 13th and 14th, which would, of course, coincide with a prospective government shutdown. Dasha, this sounds enticing to me, but the itinerary features accommodations at the Hotel Yountville with a resort and spa that, quote, extends a Tuscan European vibe, end quote. And there's a wine tour at a nearby winery and some wine caves involved. This kicked off a huge amount of Democratic infighting over the weekend on X and elsewhere. We saw Graham Plattner, the Maine's Democratic Senate candidate, basically, say that he would never attend something like this. A lot of consternation. The DSCC hasn't said whether they will still go through with this. But Dasha, we learned this morning and have in Playbook that there's another invite, and this
Oh
one
boy.
is from the Senate Republicans. They have their own high-priced donor summit planned for days 3 to 5 of the shutdown in Sea Island, Georgia, and I'm told that there's going to be some pickleball, some golfing, and some shooting involved. So what do you make of this? I mean, has Donald Trump sort of scrambled the old idea of optics that, during a moment like this where, federal workers could be furloughed or out of their jobs, that it doesn't really matter how public officials comport themselves as the rest of the nation is potentially feeling the pain of a shutdown?
Look, I think Donald Trump is the exception and not the rule, where for some reason he can do these sorts of things and his voters just don't see it in the same way as they do when just about any other politician does this. So I don't think that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you can get away with these kinds of optics these days. And it amazes me how often these kind of split screen moments do tend to happen in politics.
Well, Dasha, we've both been busy. I don't know if we have any wine cave or wine country excursions in our immediate futures, unfortunately. But it's good work.
That's like a
It's good
girl's
work
dream
if you can get it. I
California
know.
honeymoon,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I have been, to California numerous times, but never to wine
No
country,
wine
and so,
caves.
yeah, I feel deprived, and I have to confess, I did look up Hotel Yountville and just to check the room price, and I don't know that I'll be going there anytime
A
soon,
playbook
but it
retreat
looks
there, maybe? Perhaps a
that's
team
yeah,
playbook
yeah.
retreat? Let's talk to the talk to the bosses.
Yeah, just not during a federal
I
shutdown,
think we will get
so
laughed out of that boardroom real quick. So
that's right. Well, Dasha, thanks so much for being here.
thanks, Adam.
And that's all for today's show, but we have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening.